Influence.
So we've got a few points that we want to hit on that are spoiler-free. This part is still spoiler-free. And then we'll get into the spoilery stuff after this. But first up is actors. I mean,
Yes.
who really killed it?
Actors who killed it. I've got to go with, there's two big ones for me. I will say, actually, pretty much all the actors did a phenomenal job, but the two that went above and beyond for me were Tom Holland and Michael Keaton. Without going into spoilers, when we get into spoilers, I'll have more reasons for why both of those were amazing. But Tom Holland did just a great job of being this 15-year-old who has amazing secret and is trying to still have a normal life while he's trying to balance all that. So he's got the whole coming of age. Now he's got like one friend. He's still just an awkward teenager who's got this huge weight on his shoulders, and he's also already been attached to this massive thing called the Avengers. Like, he's got all this awesome stuff going on in his life, and Tom Holland really just nailed every emotion out of the park.
Absolutely.
Dealing with that. Michael Keaton, really, he didn't take place until it really became badass Michael Keaton about 3/4 into the movie. Without going into spoilers, we'll talk about it later. There's a scene that happens, and then from then on, we're getting like hardcore badass Michael Keaton.
What a great
Before that,
scene.
Honestly, anybody kind of could have played the Vulture part because they didn't really write him to be like this amazing shit, But that one scene forward was Michael Keaton at like some of his best work.
Okay.
Yeah, in my opinion.
Well, the one thing that I've seen from Marvel, and it's a regular complaint from the Marvel movies especially, not necessarily with Netflix. Marvel, they tend to do really good villains, but a lot of the villains for the Marvel movies are kind of meh. Like, if you think of Eccleston's character in Thor: The Dark World, does anybody even remember the name of that character? I mean,
no.
He was a non-event. It was really not even that important. The real character that people think of is Loki.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is great. But Loki's right on that fence. He's the brother of Thor. It's a different kind of dynamic. So it's not like
He's also very much the politician, He's
super.
Smile to your face and stab you in the back and get what I want after the fact.
Absolutely.
He literally did that.
Literally. And he chopped a hand off. He did a lot of shit.
Yeah, I feel like Vulture is a good example of that. Marvel can have decent villains in their films.
I mean, I have to say that Vulture, I have to agree with you that it was kind of one-dimensional until there was turning point or points. I would say, like almost like a descent into madness,
basically,
which was kind of cool to watch. Although I couldn't help, there was a movie that he did called Extreme Measures.
Yeah.
And Extreme Measures, where there's one of the character's son or something is kidnapped, and he can help him find it or something along those lines. But Michael Keaton's character's in prison, and he fucking weightlifts with gallons of water. It's kind of goofy, but he basically, if you watch that film, like, that's really all he tapped into. Like, he didn't have to tap into much.
No.
Birdman, different story, but this was a straightforward kind of one-dimensional character, but he made it more than anyone else probably could have.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you completely. Like, I think that he did a phenomenal job with that, especially when he turned that corner that you were
when he broke bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like, no, even piggybacking on that, like Extreme Measures, where he did that, but also he's done the complete like creeper part too, like in Pacific Heights, where he played that just completely deranged tenant that just
we get some of that
would
too.
Not go. We totally got some of that. So I love that character. I love the pick that they had for Aunt May.
Yeah,
because Aunt May, whether it was Rosemary Harris or Sally Field, you always saw Aunt May. She was old. She wasn't this attractive woman.
She was not a sex figure.
No,
at all.
And they totally make her a sex figure.
And it totally bothers Peter.
Yes,
and, awesome.
And it should.
It bothers my Peter. Oh.
But see, what I do like about kind of younging up Aunt May a little bit and making her kind of a sexier Aunt May is not only is it, Marissa Tomei, so but
please don't ever do that again.
Please,
fair.
My Peter's sad now.
But also,
he went to sleep.
Speaking of Peter, I think the age works better for a teenage Peter Parker, that she's the right age to be the aunt of Peter Parker. If you're looking at Aunt May, she's like a senior citizen. a lot of the time, which doesn't actually match up age-wise for a teenage Peter Parker. And
No.
it's like they had a kid really old, you know? Which is possible, sure, but, you know, this just makes a little bit more sense. Not only that, but if you have an Aunt May that's always sitting around the house, being old, watching old fucking Matlock reruns and shit, then, you know, it's
knitting.
not...
She's
It's
got
not...
that one piece of like really good advice at some point during the movie, and after that, it's pointless.
She's like,
She's
have
pointless.
a Werther's, Peter. You know, like it's not
Find
doing
the hope within yourself and have a
all it
hard
is-
candy.
It's just a really like wholesome family environment that really backs up why, you know, Peter has such a good head on his shoulders, which you still get that from how hard Aunt May is working, you know, to make sure that he has the best life possible. But she's more involved. She's more of a involved character in this whole process than just sitting around the house making fucking casseroles.
Agreed. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And what's cool, you know, they're very smart and strategic. And unlike, you know, when they're building this universe, they had to think obviously way ahead, you know, phase 1, 2, and 3. And they worked around that construct and filled in the holes. And with this is they knew if it went well, they would need to make more. The problem with making a lot of those movies in the past is that when you had something like that, they already were old when they played them. They were probably in their mid-20s to 30s. So by the time they got to the third film, they looked literally like 15 years older than their actual character, regardless of makeup. And now they realize if we go back, if we actually start with somebody who's young enough, and you know, then they can then build up to that the more stereotypical view of that character, you know, and how you perceive them and how they look in comics. And it's really intelligent that they have their mechanics of how they work that out. I think are brilliant. They've changed the industry.
Yeah. So like even when they started with Iron Man, you know, you could tell that they obviously, I guess, unaged Tony Stark. Like the earlier shots when he's clean shaven and he's like right out of like not prep school, out of Ivy League, Ivy League education. They didn't have to go back and like just redo all that stuff like post production and all that. They could just be like, okay, we can film this right from the start because this kid's literally a teenager. He's not a 30-year-old who's playing a teenager.
No.
And he nailed it. But speaking of like the characters and everything, and kind of how this film was developed, this is a superhero movie,
right?
So there's going to be a fair amount of action in here, but this wasn't a nonstop balls to the wall action film. It had its moments, definitely. Like it definitely had very solid action sequences. But as far as the balance goes with the action, you know, do we think that it did it justice?
The mechanics of the actions in a Marvel film, and there's plenty of videos out there that show it. You know, they're very they're very big. You know, they're very wide. Winter Soldier, probably one of the best fight scenes ever, is between him and the Winter Soldier, and they're you know, Romanoff is under the bridge. She shoots, and they get into it. Like that fight scene is so intricate, and there's so much thought put into it that although awesome may not, you know, maybe take away a little bit. But when you go to this movie, they were just like everything that he does. If it's not for fun, you know, it's because he put himself in that situation, and they didn't overdo it. Like it was necessary. Why there was action. It would literally. But it didn't have to show him as a badass. It just showed him as a guy who cared. You know, not someone who was the greatest fighter in the world. Yeah. And that was cool.
Plus, it progressively built him up. Okay, you didn't see him start off with some huge fight or anything like that.
Like a wrestling match?
Correct, like a wrestling match against a professional wrestler or anything like that. But what you do see is you see him start out very low key. All right, you can see, you know, obviously they start out with, you know, something very, very small, and then they build it up to the action that we see at the end.
Yeah.
So you see that, you see another smaller but more large scale, and then you see something that's even larger than that before it gets to the finale where it's just a phenomenal, so it's just a good way to.
It wasn't an explosion in your face of action.
No, it was a very good build up.
There was enough. Yeah, there was enough. And I would say, yeah, it does build, but I feel like it kind of builds, and then it would throw in a small snippet, and then it would go bigger, and then throw in another small snippet, and then go bigger. Like it wasn't like just constantly getting bigger. It would like back up just like a step, and then go like 3 forward, then back up another step, and then go 3 forward. You know what I mean? Like they kind of bounce back and forth, but there was enough story and dialogue in between to where, you know, like you said, it wasn't just an explosion of action. It wasn't a fucking Michael Bay movie where you're just, you know, orgasm of action.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's like kick butt, plot points. Kick butt, plot points.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think what helped as far as the pauses in between the action for this film, at least, is the fact that it gave more gravitas to the fact that this is a kid. That this is a kid that this is not a normal thing for him. This is something that's always only happened in the past, you know, few months for Spider-Man, for Peter Parker.
It's not even, that's like 7 months probably in the time frame.
Maybe,
6 months in Civil War, and then that has to have been like after he came back. He literally came back right after Civil War, so 6 months.
Yeah,
Well,
so
I think it said like on the screen it was actually like 8 months, 6 months, 8 months.
yeah,
later,
so I mean, it's not even a
specifically.
year at this point that he's been living this kind of larger life, and then he gets pushed back into where, you know, saving, you know, people from purse snatchers and bike thieves and shit like that, and
car thieves
and stuff. So when the bigger moments happen, he's jazzed as shit about it, but also super inexperienced with it. And those pauses in between where he gets to reflect on those moments are important.
Yes.
That's an excellent point, because the action, I was figuring out a way to describe it earlier. It's very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very different than most movies, especially in Marvel, where it's very big and it's, you know, it's amazing, well choreographed, and thought out. But this was intimate because you were almost inside of his head. You know, it was almost like Scrubs meets Spider-Man, especially with, you know, the girl just said, like, go for it, Peter. Like, that's your conscience right there. Like, it was just so intimate. And I really appreciated that. So maybe that's a John Hughes thing.
What you're saying is that Peter Parker drinks apple teenies. Is what you're saying.
Hey, maybe it makes him feel fancy.
Although I would love to see like a Zach Braff Spider-Man. Like, that would be fantastic.
That would be
he's
like
aged out a bit.
That would be a funny or die thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing I also want to cover, we talked about the actors that portrayed the characters in the movie, but the characters themselves, I mean, the writing is so important in a movie like this so that it doesn't seem two-dimensional, you know?
Right.
You need to have these characters well fleshed out, especially something like Spider-Man, where we've seen 2 other iterations with 2 other actors that have portrayed this character in previous series. And now you got the youngest Spider-Man. He's like 15. And how do you really get that point across, that this is a developing teenager that's still dealing with teenager stuff, but is also able to pick up 3,000 pounds? And, you know, I feel like the characters were incredibly well fleshed out. And I think leaning on that kind of that John Hughes kind of tone is what really gave it that gravitas, where the kids felt like they were talking like kids. It wasn't like mini adults, you know? They talked like kids did. They asked each other out like kids did. They gave each other shit like kids did, you know? Mm-hmm. And the adults spoke like adults. So you had that nice contrast in between. And honestly, I would say personally, as much as I'm a fan of the first 2 Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, the character development, the dimension of the characters, I'd say this is probably the strongest out of all the Spider-Mans that I've seen.
I was going to say that, you know how you could flesh his character out, especially when he's wearing the suit, is to have some random character tell him his voice sounds like a girl.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's Spider-Man. That's how you know. It's still fucking changing.
Yeah.
I'm almost there.
Now, speaking of John Hughes, or
No, go ahead. I'll piggyback.
speaking of John Hughes, that was a major conversation piece with this movie going in, is that it definitely leaned on that kind of 80s teen comedy drama tone. And I absolutely agree. It definitely did. Now, do you think that it leaned on it a little bit too much, or was that really kind of the necessary like approach to make this movie feel like appropriate for the age group of these, you know, these characters?
No, I thought it was absolutely great, because you have, number one, you have kids that are actually closer to the age of the characters they're portraying. I know we talked about outside about the different incarnations of Spider-Man and Peter Parker in the past being well beyond their teenage years, and we've got a kid now who is actually a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So you can literally relate to it a lot more. It's not like watching The Breakfast Club and watching a bunch of 20-somethings spend attention.
I don't know. I related to
first
Breakfast
had-
Club.
No, I mean,
even though they were
totally
20
no,
something.
I
Bender?
completely love the movie. Don't get me wrong, but you still have like a 27-year-old guy playing like a 17-year-old kid. So
Yeah.
there's still that. This completely had teenagers playing teenagers, and it was, I think, a great testament to number one, actually the acting of a teenager, and then just just how everything kind of just flowed through it.
What I appreciated was that they didn't pander to any specific demographic as far as age or even style, the way of speech. They didn't shorten their words and say Avi and rents, like they didn't pander to anything. They wrote it very human, and almost like in the situations and how they spoke about it were almost timeless. Because if we can pull back in our memories, things like The Breakfast Club or others movies where I was saying earlier, it kind of makes you feel that way when you're watching it, which is really good, is that it doesn't pander to any specific type of person. It just it's very real in those moments. That's pretty fucking crazy in a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
And crazy in a Spider-Man movie.
That's the thing. This is supposed to be like a fun superhero movie, but
Right.
you're getting actual feels for these characters and what they're dealing with as teenagers. Just never mind the superhero part of it. Just the interpersonal relationships of being a teenager and all the awkwardness that comes with that. I mean,
Awkward's in space.
oh, super.
Yeah, like
So we're looking at just overall, before we get into the spoiler aspect of it, we're working on a new scale factor for Geeks Under the Influence that we're calling it the ABV scale. Kind of like alcohol by volume for beer, but this is the Awesomeness by volume scale, 1 to 10. So 10 being a dick kicker, and a 1 being basically Coors Light. Just not
Pretty
worth
much.
your time.
yeah.
Bud Light.
Or Suicide Squad.
Or Suicide Squad, yeah, it would be 1. So, or a 0.5. So, going around the table, starting with Dan.
Oh man.
From 1 to 10 on the Awesomeness by volume scale, what would you give this film?
I would have to give it at least an 8.5, and I might even be underselling it a little bit there. I absolutely love this movie. Now, I think part of the reason that I don't rate it as high as I might have on some other films in the past is that, number one, like, I mean, I love Spider-Man, but Spider-Man, it's obviously it's no secret to anybody here. He's not my definitive favorite as far as superhero characters are concerned.
He doesn't turn angry and green enough for you?
That's pretty much.
Is that pretty much it? Yeah,
That's pretty much it.
Clean
But,
cut range.
it was a very solid movie. The acting was great. I thought the plot was phenomenal. Very well written. And everybody I thought did an amazing job. Even from like some of just the little background characters that we'll delve more into here in a little bit.
in just a minute, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Smashy.
So after watching it, I gave it a lot of thought, and of course, recently as I've seen it, Wonder Woman was popping into my head, over the superhero genre just in general, and trying to weigh it in that way. And I would say, like, for what it was trying to be, I'll give it a 9.
A 9.
A 9.
Okay.
For what it was trying to be. But if I compare it, and this is it sucks, because when I compare it to other superhero movies, such as like Wonder Woman, I may drop it down, but it wouldn't be that much.
Yeah, just slightly.
But what it did and what it tried to be and what it didn't try to be, I'll give it a 9.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Lowdown, what are you thinking as far as scale goes?
I'm giving it 8.
An 8?
An 8.
Solid 8? Okay.
Solid 8.
So that's pretty good. I mean, 8 is no slouch. That's,
No, eight's when it comes
great.
well, in my mind, when it comes to rating, 8's really good.
Yeah.
Because there are very, very, very few 10s. I'm talking like Empire, Dark Knight, like those are 10s.
Yeah.
Winter
Yeah.
Soldier, that's
Yeah.
a 10 for me.
It's a fucking 10.
Yeah, Winter Soldier's a 10.
That's pretty much a 10.
In my system, like coming from an 8, that's 2 points below Empire. You know what I mean? Like that's a solid fucking rating, at least for me, coming from me.
I totally give you,
You know?
that. That's
Because I love the movie.
yeah.
It wasn't 10 caliber, but I love the fucking movie. Like,
And-
I really don't have any. See, I don't really have any qualms about it. It's just, I guess, because when we talk about rating, like for us, we're not critics. We're not go looking at it from their standpoint of how a movie's done. We're looking at it from the nerd aspect of what we want to fucking see, the fan perspective, what we want to fucking see.
What brings the joygasm on?
Exactly.
Yeah, we talk all day long about things we love and don't love on this podcast. I mean, that's pretty much what we do on this thing.
That's the point.
But
No.
I don't think
We criticize, but we're not claiming to be critics.
No, because I don't think we're coming from a perspective of fandom. You know,
Right.
we're not coming from a perspective of like, you know, how it. We're not looking for the real like, you know,
Technical,
soupçon of the film. We're the
soupçon.
the you know the je ne
croissant?
sais quoi.
Oh,
The
God.
French words
A
of the
certain-
film.
I don't know what.
What the French call a certain I don't know what.
Yes, basically, what we're looking at is whether or not it was enjoyable, if we think it did proper justice for the characters
Yeah.
that we've come to love for a good majority of our lives.
Saturday morning cartoons, baby.
Yeah.
And comics.
Oh, God, yes.
Oh my god, I miss Saturday
So
morning
in
cartoons.
that regard, we've got an 8.5 from Dan, a 9 from Smash, an 8 from Lowdown, and I'm going with an 8.25. So we're all pretty close to. It's a solid 8.25 is high marks in my opinion. I mean, that's really good.
This stuff is high. Like 8, anything 8 and up is high. I mean, that's, you know, we got a 8.5. You know,
Yeah, because after
And a 9.
that, it's just minor things.
So it's 8 and
You know,
up,
but they're big to us.
8 to 10 is like what we're looking.
We're looking at 8 to 9.
8 to 9.
Literally, right there.
Yeah, right in that scale, and I think that's very valid. There's not a lot wrong with this film. Like, there's nothing that I would actually say is wrong with this movie. There's nothing. There's maybe minor little nitpicky things that we'll get into here in just a second.
Right.
But overall, it's a very well put together film. It's a very well thought out film. The number of Easter eggs alone in this movie speak to the fact that the writers or the writer. Speaking of which, the writer.
There's probably more hidden ones.
Yes, the writer.
yeah.
Please drop the writer.
Let's drop this writer. For those that are unaware, the writer of Spider-Man: Homecoming was the little brother in Freaks and Geeks.
Yep.
It's on Netflix. Check it out. If you
Yeah.
haven't seen it,
Yes.
you need to educate yourself.
I think our fan base is pretty well versed in Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
If they
I
haven't
hope
seen it,
so.
they're at least aware. But the little kid, the little brother in Freaks and Geeks, that is the writer of Spider-Man: Homecoming.
He was
His name's
also
Sam?
Mitch in Waiting.
Yeah,
That's right.
Oh
He
yeah,
was the trainee in Waiting.
What was
Yeah,
his name?
because he
Sam?
shows him the brain at the
Sam
end.
and
Freaks and Geeks.
in Freaks
Sam?
and Geeks, yeah, Sam.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's who wrote this
He was
movie.
also
so
in Father's Day.
He earned his geek credential.
Dude, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like I hadn't looked into any of that.
I
and when
can
I
fucking believe that.
when you told me
Wasn't in
that,
Father's Day.
blew my fucking mind.
Yeah.
That blew my goddamn mind.
And
Like
that's probably
different
why Martin Starr, who was also in Freaks and Geeks,
Is
was
the
the
coach
teacher
for the,
the debate coach,
debate
Oh,
coach,
yeah.
decathlon.
or the decathlon coach. Yeah. So that's where we stand.
Spoilers.
GUIPodcast.com.